There's a moment that happens to high earners. Usually around the time their salary crosses a number they once dreamed of, they look at their bank account and feel a quiet kind of horror. They have less left over than they did when they made half this much. The mainstream story says income is the answer. Earn more, save more, build wealth. It's the equation every personal finance influencer keeps repeating because it sounds like math. It isn't math, it's marketing. The system that profits from your higher income. The lenders, the brands, the housing market, the lifestyle merchants. 300 years ago, a French king bankrupted his entire nobility without firing a single shot. The same trick is being used on you. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how it works and why no one in the financial industry has any reason to tell you. Law 1, the wealth that cannot be spent. A 36-year-old corporate attorney in Atlanta named Marisol earns $215,000 a year. By any reasonable measure, she sits in the top 8% of American earners. Her LinkedIn looks like a trophy case. Her parents introduce her at family gatherings with a particular kind of pride. Her checking account, on the morning we're talking about, has $1,847 in it. 3 days before payday, she owns a townhouse bought in 2021 for $610,000, now valued near $695,000, with about $158,000 in equity. Her 401k holds $187,000. By the formula your high school economics teacher taught you, Marisol has a net worth approaching $500,000 before the age of 40. She also has $14,200 in credit card debt at 24.7% interest, a $51,000 auto loan on a vehicle that loses value every time she drives it, and a knot in her stomach every time her phone lights up with a Visa notification. This is the first law of the high income trap, and most people who fall into it never realize it has a name. Your wealth is locked. Your life is liquid. The Federal Reserve publishes something called the Distributional Financial Accounts, quarterly data showing where American wealth actually sits. The top 10% of households by income hold most of the country's net worth, but the part nobody quotes is what kind of wealth it is. For households earning between $150,000 and $400,000, the majority of that net worth is parked in two places: home equity, retirement accounts, both of which are locked behind walls you cannot easily breach. You can look wealthy on a balance sheet and not be able to fix a transmission without a credit card. Marisol's house is worth $695,000. She cannot eat her house. She cannot pay her property tax with the granite countertops. The 401k cannot help her because withdrawing it before 59.5 triggers a 10% penalty plus full income tax, meaning a $10,000 withdrawal at her marginal bracket becomes about $6,400 in her hand. The system is designed this way on purpose. Illiquid wealth is wealth that benefits the institutions, managing it more than it benefits you. Net worth is a story you tell. Cash flow is the truth. The brokerage industry, the real estate industry, and the personal finance media all share the same vested interest in keeping your eyes on the bigger number, because that bigger number justifies every product they sell you. A bigger mortgage, a bigger home, a bigger contribution to the retirement account they manage, a bigger life insurance policy. What none of them want you to track is the single number that actually decides whether you're rich or broke in any given month: free cash flow. The dollars that exist after fixed obligations, before lifestyle leak, that you can save, invest in something liquid, or spend at will. Marisol's free cash flow on a $215,000 salary is $187 a month. A teacher in Toledo making $58,000 with no debt and a paid-off Civic has more free cash flow than she does. He is, by the only definition that matters in your daily life, wealthier than she is. The Empower Wealth and Wellness Index, a recurring survey of American adults. Verify specific year figure keeps finding the same uncomfortable thing year after year. The income level at which Americans say they would feel rich keeps climbing faster than inflation. In recent surveys, it has crossed $500,000. The line you have to cross to feel wealthy moves further away every time you take a step toward it. That is not an accident. That is the design. Law 2, the status tax. In 1682, a king named Louis XIV moved his entire court out of Paris and into a swamp 12 miles southwest of the city. He had spent the previous 2 decades draining the swamp and erecting on top of it the most expensive piece of architecture in European history, Versailles. 2,300 rooms, gardens that required 8,000 workers to maintain, a hall of mirrors designed to make visiting nobility feel like they were standing inside a jewel. What the history books rarely explain is why he built it. Louis XIV had a problem. The French nobility had a habit of staging rebellions. Powerful aristocrats with their own land, their own wealth, and their own private armies kept undermining the throne. Civil war was expensive and unpredictable, so Louis engineered something more elegant. He made attendance at his court compulsory for any noble who wanted political favor, and then he made the cost of being at court ruinous. To live at Versailles, you needed silk garments changed multiple times a day. You needed a carriage, servants, a presence at every dinner, every hunt, every ceremony. You needed to gamble at the king's tables and lose gracefully. You needed to sponsor artists, commission portraits, and host smaller versions of the king's parties at your own estates. The nobles arrived at Versailles wealthy and proud. Within a generation, most of them were drowning in debt to Parisian bankers, mortgaging their ancestral lands to maintain the illusion of status the king had quietly weaponized against them. Louis XIV did not need to seize their wealth. He just needed to redefine what nobility looked like. The nobles did the rest themselves. 340 years later, you have inherited their problem. This is the second law of the trap. The status tax. It is not a metaphor. Every income tier in modern America has a uniform. Not literal clothing, though that is part of it, but a coordinated set of consumption signals you are required to perform to remain credible inside that tier. The neighborhood, the car, the vacation, the school district your children attend, the renovations to a kitchen you barely cook in, the salon, the gym membership, the wedding gift you give your colleague, the wristwatch you wear into the meeting. When you cross from $90,000 to $180,000, you do not just earn more money, you enter a different court. Each court has its own Versailles, and attendance is not optional if you want to keep the job, the relationships, and the social position the income depends on. Devin is a 41-year-old orthopedic surgeon in Houston who clears $487,000 a year before taxes. He drives a leased Range Rover because the partners at his practice all drive comparable cars. And showing up in a Camry, in his words, sends a signal. His children attend a private school costing $36,000 per child per year. His wife belongs to a tennis club where the dues are smaller than the cost of looking like she belongs there. His mortgage on a 4,800 square foot house in the Memorial Villages neighborhood eats $11,200 a month. He has $42,000 in liquid savings and a recurring nightmare in which the practice is sold, and he is suddenly 28 again, holding a med school loan balance and starting over. The status tax is the difference between your nominal income and the income you actually keep after performing the tier you are in. It is invisible because it does not appear on a tax return. The IRS does not collect it. Versailles does. The system does not need to take your money. It just needs to convince you to spend it on the right things. In 1899, a sociologist named Thorstein Veblen published a book called The Theory of the Leisure Class. He gave the behavior its first proper name, conspicuous consumption, the practice of buying things primarily for the signal they send to others about your social position. Veblen believed it was a feature of the wealthy. A century of behavioral research has shown the opposite. It operates most aggressively in the class one rung below truly wealthy, the class that has to keep proving it belongs. That class is you, if your salary starts with a 1 and ends in 5 zeros. Law 3. The dressing gown cascade. In 1769, a French philosopher named Denis Diderot, yes, the encyclopedia man, wrote a small, almost embarrassed essay titled Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown. A friend had given him a beautiful scarlet dressing gown as a gift. Diderot put it on, sat down at his old wooden desk in his old wooden chair, and felt something deeply uncomfortable. The new gown made everything else in the room look shabby. The chair was wrong, the desk was wrong, the rug, the lamp, the prints on the wall, all suddenly inadequate, so he replaced them, one by one. Within months he had spent himself into debt and was, in his own words, more miserable than he had ever been in the cheap wool robe. He named what had happened to him. The new gown was not a gift. It was an entry point, a single object that demanded the renovation of an entire life around it. 250 years later, behavioral economists call this the Diderot Effect. It is the third law of the high income trap, and it is the mechanism by which a single raise consumes 10 times its own value. You receive a promotion. The raise lands at $24,000 a year, roughly $1,400 a month after tax. The first thing you do, often without conscious thought, is move into a slightly nicer apartment. The new apartment requires new furniture because the IKEA pieces that looked charming in your old place look juvenile in the new one. The new neighborhood has a different grocery store, slightly more expensive. The new colleagues meet for drinks at a different kind of bar, and you buy different clothes for a different version of yourself. Within 18 months of the promotion, you are netting roughly the same amount you were before, sometimes less. The dressing gown demanded everything around it match. A 33-year-old product manager named Priya at a Seattle tech firm tracked her own version of this. In 2022, she earned $128,000 and saved $2,100 a month. By 2024, she was earning $194,000 and saving $640 a month. Her paycheck had grown by 51%. Her savings rate had collapsed by nearly 70%. Nothing dramatic happened. No expensive divorce. No medical disaster. Just a series of small upgrades, each one feeling justified, each one demanding the next. The honest math of high incomes is rarely the math of the income itself. It is the math of the cascading upgrades the income silently authorizes. And the cascade does not stop at things. It extends to people. The new tier of friends has different expectations, different birthdays, different vacations, different gifts. It extends to obligations. The promotion comes with a more demanding job, which generates more soft costs. Meals out because there is no time to cook, dry cleaning, childcare during longer hours, a gym membership to manage the stress of all of it. Diderot wrote near the end of his essay that he had been the absolute master of my old dressing gown, but had become the slave of the new one. He could have been describing your last raise. Law 4. The two-income mirage. In 2003, a bankruptcy attorney and a research economist published a book the personal finance industry has spent the last 20 years quietly burying. The bankruptcy attorney was Elizabeth Warren. Yes, before the Senate. The book was The Two-Income Trap. The data inside it was ugly enough that the industry never invited it back to the conversation. Warren and her co-author, her daughter Amelia Tyagi, looked at decades of bankruptcy filings and asked a simple question. Were dual-income families more financially secure than the single-income families of a generation earlier? The answer was the opposite of what everyone had assumed. Two-income households were more likely to file for bankruptcy than the one-income households of the 1970s, even after adjusting for inflation. Even at higher income levels. The reason was not careless spending. The reason was that two-income families had committed two incomes to fixed costs. The mortgage was sized for two paychecks. The school district was chosen, and the home was bought based on the combined number. The cars, the daycare, the insurance, all of it assumed both incomes would continue forever. When one income disappeared through layoff, illness, divorce, parental leave, a sick child, the family had no slack. They had bought a life that required both engines running at full power with no failsafe. This is the fourth law, and it is the one high-earning couples almost never see coming. Add a second six-figure income to a household, and the math should make you bulletproof. In practice, it makes you brittle. The second income gets immediately committed to a more expensive house in a more competitive school district, to two professional wardrobes, to childcare a dual-career family requires, to a higher tax bracket that eats both incomes more aggressively than either would alone. A married couple in Charlotte. Call her Elise, 44, marketing VP. Her husband is a regional sales director. Together, they earn $382,000 a year. Their mortgage is $5,800 a month. Their two children attend a Montessori program totaling $42,000 annually. The cars, the lawn service, the meal delivery, the second nanny for evenings when both parents travel, every line item assumes the income will not drop. When Elise's company restructured in early 2025 and her base was cut by $40,000 with no warning, the household did not have 90 days of runway. They had 31. Two incomes feel like security. They are usually a multiplier on lifestyle commitment, which is the opposite of security. The cruelest twist is that the higher the combined income, the harder the unwinding. A household earning $80,000 can downsize. The school is the public school. The car is the older car. The lifestyle is unaltered by the loss of one paycheck because no surplus was extracted from it. A household earning $380,000 has spent the last decade extracting every dollar of that surplus and converting it into fixed obligations, house, school, club, calendar, that cannot be reversed in a single quarter. The two-income family is not twice as wealthy as the one-income family was. It is twice as committed. Law 5. The cage is psychological, the hardest law to see because it lives inside you. By the time most high earners feel the trap closing, they have made a quiet identity transaction without ever signing a contract for it. The income has become the self. When a 24-year-old assistant making $52,000 thinks about quitting, the calculation is financial. When a 48-year-old executive making $310,000 thinks about quitting, the calculation is existential. The income has been welded to the identity for so long that lowering it feels like a kind of social death. The neighbors will know, the cousins will know, the old college friends will know. The version of herself she has been performing for 15 years will need a new costume, and the costume comes with a different name. The cage is psychological before it is financial. Behavioral economists have a clinical term for the upward half of this: hedonic adaptation, the phenomenon by which any new income level becomes the new baseline within roughly 6 to 12 months. Your happiness returns to where it was, but the spending stays. What they study less, because it does not fit cleanly into a graph, is the inverse, the asymmetry of decline. Going up the ladder feels normal within a year. Going down feels like loss for a decade. In 2020, an investor and writer named Bill Perkins published a book called Die with Zero that contained one quiet observation that ought to haunt every high earner. The wealthiest decade of most professionals' lives, their 50s, is the decade when they have the least capacity to enjoy the things money can buy. The body is slower, the friends have moved, the children are gone, they have bought a house, a car, a club membership, and a wardrobe optimized for a life they no longer have time to live. The point of money is not the money. It is the freedom the money was supposed to buy. Most high earners never collect that freedom because they spent it before it arrived. On the version of themselves they thought the money would make them. The way out is not the way personal finance influencers describe it. It is not a budget. Budgets are downstream of identity. You cannot budget your way out of a life you have built to be expensive because every spreadsheet eventually runs into the wall of who you have decided you are. The way out is colder and quieter. It is the slow, deliberate, often lonely work of asking which of the costs in your life are paying for things you actually want and which are paying for the performance of an income tier you have outgrown the need to belong to. The first time a high earner walks into a restaurant her colleagues frequent and orders the cheapest thing on the menu without explaining herself, that is the moment the trap begins to crack. Not because the savings on one meal matter, they don't, but because the social cost did not kill her. And now she knows it. The Versailles around her loses one nail. Marisol, the attorney from Atlanta, sold her townhouse in late 2025. She moved into a smaller place 10 minutes further from the city. She paid off the credit cards, she told 2 friends, and no one else. In her own words, she is still rich on paper, less rich on the surface, and finally, for the first time, rich underneath. The status tax stops collecting the moment you stop volunteering to pay it. Outro. The promise of a higher income was that it would buy you freedom. The closer you walk toward that promise, the more you start to suspect freedom was never really on offer. What was on offer was a more elegant cage with better lighting and a higher monthly cost. You came here suspecting something was wrong. The arithmetic was supposed to be working. The income was supposed to be the answer. Instead, the answer keeps moving away, just slightly faster than your raises can catch. The next obstacle is harder than the one we just walked through. Knowing the trap exists does not free you from it. The status tax does not stop collecting the moment you understand it. The Diderot Effect does not pause to let you catch up. The two-income mirage does not announce itself the day you sign the mortgage. The identity that has been welded to your salary will not detach because you read an essay about Versailles. The work is small, daily, and unwitnessed. It is the meal you order without performing, the vacation you do not photograph, the neighborhood you do not move to, the promotion you accept without auto-upgrading the life around it. Each small refusal is a single nail pulled from the cage. You clicked this video suspecting that high income was supposed to make you rich and that something about the equation was lying to you. The truth is worse than that. The lie was not in the math. The lie was in what you thought the math was for. The thought to carry into the rest of your day is small. The richest version of you is not the one with the highest salary. It is the one paying the lowest status tax on the income she already has. If something in this struck a nerve, if you heard your own life inside any of those numbers, stay close. This channel exists for the women who suspect the rules of money were written for someone else and who want the version of the truth no one was supposed to give them. Subscribe, and the next quiet revelation will find you when it's ready.